Hello, everybody, and welcome to Harmonia 1928. I am your hostess for the evening, Lauren Leiderman. I'm the co-director of Jewish Remembrance Week alongside Eric Fraunholtz. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you fabulously dressed people to this evening of music, love, life, loss. But before we get into my spiel, it is my absolute honor to have a personal friend, Kinga Hartman, introduce us to this evening. Kinga is a personal friend of mine, and she is the chief of the organization that is hosting us here tonight. Bitte, Kinga.
Szanowni Państwo, drodzy goście, liebe Lauren. Jest mi niezmiernie miło powitać Państwa w imieniu Fundacji Pamięć, Edukacja, Kultura, która wspólnie z niemieckim partnerem, Stowarzyszeniem Meeting Point Memory Messiaen, pracuje nad upamiętnieniem byłego obozu jenieckiego Stalag 8a. Jak Państwu wiadomo, polskie miasto Zgorzelec powstało w wyniku podziału miasta Görlitz nową granicą między Polską a Niemcami w 1945 roku. W czasie II wojny światowej obóz ten, to miejsce, znajdowało się na terenie Görlitz-Ost. Chciałabym krótko wspomnieć o tym, że i to miejsce nie jest wolne od tragedii narodu żydowskiego. W 1941 roku około 3000 żołnierzy, jeńców pochodzenia żydowskiego, polskich jeńców, zostało przeniesionych z innych obozów jenieckich w Niemczech właśnie tutaj do Stalagu 8a. Następnie stąd przeniesionych do obozu pracy w Lublinie, a tam w 1943 roku zamordowanych. Dzisiaj przenosimy się do roku 1929. W tamtym czasie wprawdzie już pojawiały się złe wieści w gminach żydowskich w Niemczech i odczuwalne były szykany. Nikt jednak nie myślał, nie przeczuwał tego, co się stało po roku 1933 i w latach 40. w niemieckich obozach zagłady. Pochodzę z Warszawy, miasta, które przed wybuchem II wojny światowej tętniło życiem i kulturą jego żydowskich mieszkańców, a jidysz słychać było codziennie na ulicach. Wyobraźmy sobie więc, że przenosimy się w lata, w których nikt nie myślał o zbliżającej się tragedii, w których muzycy żydowscy grali koncerty, a żydowska publiczność ich oklaskiwała. Spróbujmy wrócić myślami do tamtych lat. Życzę Państwu udanego wieczoru.
I wish you an enjoyable evening.
Before we get started, I want to welcome a few very special guests who are with us tonight. Franziska Schubert, who is our representative in the Saxon Parliament. The Mayor of Zgorzelec, Rafał Gronich. And with us tonight, unbelievably, are two Holocaust survivors from the original Jewish community of Görlitz, whose families are represented in the picture behind me. That would be Liselotte Barochel from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Renate Moore Langeani, also from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Renate, it's hard for me to believe that this concert was put on about 1 year before you were born. And here we are doing it again. The idea for Harmonia 1928 was born after a trip deep into the archives of the Central Archives for the History of Jewish Peoples in Old Jerusalem. It is safe to say that, as usual, I was the youngest person visiting that day, and I think the archivists were quite surprised to see me asking them to pull anything and everything related to the city of Görlitz. What they brought me was 10 enormous boxes, filled to the brim with papers, hundreds, if not thousands of papers, and slowly but surely, I went through each and every one. And among the thousands of fascinating documents, I came upon the program you see here. A concert produced on February the 14th, 1928, to help fundraise for the Görlitz Jewish Youth Group. On this program were names of families with whom I work with, who I know. There were names of musical compositions, which I loved. And it was somewhere in that crazy moment, in this hot space, not unlike today, because it was Israel in August. There was a crazy idea born in my brain to bring this concert to life somehow. And that is exactly what we're doing tonight. So let's talk about how this is going to go. Tonight's Salon Abend will be an alternating mix of conversation and musical performance. It will be about love, loss, and most importantly, life. These themes made it super appropriate, in my opinion, to do it here at the Remembrance Center at Stalag 8A. As Kinga has already said, a German political prisoner of war camp, where a remarkable French composer and musician, Oliver Messiaen, was imprisoned for 9 horrible months. However, it was while imprisoned here that he wrote one of the 20th century's greatest pieces of musical art, the Quartet for the End of Time, a piece that music students and professionals all over the world study as part of music history to this day. So by making this beautiful music here tonight, we are not only helping to keep Messiaen's legacy alive, we are keeping the legacy alive of many of the Jewish families sitting here with us tonight, whose ancestors undoubtedly would have been at this original concert in 1928. But having a conversation by yourself is a little dull. So I have invited to join me this evening the extraordinary, the remarkable Leontine Meyer-van Mensch. And let me tell you about Leontine. Leontine was born to a Jewish family in the Netherlands in 1972. She studied New and Theoretical History as well as Jewish Studies in Amsterdam, Jerusalem, and Berlin, as well as protection of European cultural property with a focus on museology in Frankfurt am Oder. She worked at the Jewish Historical Museum in Amsterdam and was a lecturer and research associate in museological theory and professional ethics at the Rijnwaard Academy in Amsterdam. And prior to joining the Jewish Museum in Berlin as the program director and deputy director in February of 2017, Leontine was vice director of Museum of European Cultures of the National Museums in Berlin since 2014. And since 2019, she's been here with us in Saxony, where she is the director of the State Ethnographic Collections of Saxony and the Ethnological Museums in Leipzig, Dresden, and Herrnhut. And I have to brag on Leontine because she is one of the forefront people in the field of museum science, returning artifacts to countries of their origin. She actually just got back from New Zealand, and I don't know how you're doing it, but I'm so grateful you're here, Leontine. Please give Leontine a big round of applause. And with that, let's talk.
Oh, my evening is already such a success because I am wearing a boa. So sorry.
Okay. So Leontine, this program that I have here, like I said, it is the product of the Jüdische Jugendbund Görlitz, and I think that's a topic that you know a little bit about. What can you tell us about Jewish youth clubs in Germany at this time, 1928, the 1920s?
Well, I would like to go 2 steps further back in time. A nation that tries to invent itself, find itself, and there the connection to nature was very important. So especially young people did lots of things in nature and invented Germanness. And at the beginning of this German youth movement, it was a very inclusive group, but already quite early, Jews were left out of that equation. Because in Romanticism, and especially late Romanticism, Jews were left out. then there were all these kinds of Jewish youth clubs, groups, of all kinds of demeanors, secular, orthodox, something in between, socialist, more liberal, very national, also Zionist, although that came quite late. During the process of post-World War I and the rise of anti-Semitism, those Jewish youth clubs became, of course, more and more also safe spaces. Safe spaces where people could be themselves, figure out who they were, and, as you can see on the photograph, had enormous fun. And that is something that we, of course, post-45 tend to forget, that people met, fell in love, get enormously drunk, and had lots of fun. And I think that is always important to always also to recognize that. And so was the case also here in Görlitz, where and as you already said, there were lots of gatherings and social events, and people spend it because, you know, it's a mitzvah to spend money and to give something to something Jewish, so donate it to the synagogue or other Jewish welfare context was also always part of it.
So you would think an event like this would be relatively common in a Jewish community the size of Görlitz?
I think we already have a very Jewish event tonight, right? Yeah, I think that is absolutely true, that people would meet, and maybe that's also very much a Jewish thing. It was about fun, and it was about, you know, flirting and getting to know people and networking. It was about culture, and lots of times also about Jewish topics, and those Jewish topics and the content of those Jewish topics, of course, gradually became more fundamental. Questions is, will I then become a Zionist and sort of, you know, move to Israel, or do I pack my things and go to Amsterdam or to Brazil or to the United States? And that we also very much see in those, especially oral histories, that the moment of fun was always still there, but that the in-between contents became more raw, more darker.
Yeah.
But 1928, that was, I think, still not the case.
They look like they're having fun in that picture. For everyone to know, these are original pictures from the Görlitz Jewish community. We didn't have to go far to find inspiration from our group. Actually, one of the funny points that I was talking with the Levy family from Australia and the Feldman family from Argentina is, we know that Kurt Feldman and Gerda Levy were both in this youth group. And we found some pictures of them where we think that it looks rather intimate. So we were actually laughing about like these relationships that we don't always think about in context of what happened before the Holocaust, that these were people, especially teenagers, and what their lives were quite beautiful.
They were young. It was the Roaring 20s. They had, of course, experienced they had experienced the First World War. They had experienced the Great Depression. And what we know about this 20s is that in midst of this whole burn down, it was also dancing on the volcano. So it's always those two sides of the coin. Deeply economic despair, a rise of anti-Semitism, and maybe also important for tonight, anti-Slavic sentiments, or very strong anti-Polish sentiments as well. But on the other hand, maybe because of that enormous escapism and all sorts of stimulating stuff that people took as well. So it's and as I said before, and you were already mentioning that as well, I think with a post-45 lens, we always tend to forget that. And it's enormously important, I feel, to recognize those young people also in their strength of being young. And because of because of the First World War, there was also one generation missing. So it was also these young people with no generation, at least of men, above them. So they could also maybe free themselves in that respect of lots of other things.
Wow. Well, speaking of escapism, I think this is a good segue to bring our first musical number of the night. It is my absolute honor to invite Yuto Kiguchi to the piano to open our concert with Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Yuto is the first winner of the Ibo Slotowski Award for Excellence in Piano, and it is our absolute honor to have him in Görlitz tonight playing this concert, which Ibo Slotowski was the original pianist for. Yuto, please take it away. Fred Cohn, their father, Janice's uncle, Greg and Renee's father, was one of the first Holocaust survivors from Görlitz that I got to meet. We haven't met in person, but we've spoken many times over Zoom over the last 3 years, and their family is a very special one to me. And so it was my honor to help bring their Stolpersteine to Görlitz, and we did that in 2021. And the story of their grandmother, Ibolika, always really fascinated me because she was a professional musician. She was a professional pianist, a Jewish woman working and living here in Görlitz. That beautiful photo, I mean, she was a stunner, wasn't she? She was gorgeous. She was born in Budapest, Hungary, on August the 29th, 1900. She was married to her wonderful husband, Walter, and they lived in Görlitz where they had their 2 little boys, and later they would have a little girl. But that was in Danzig, if I'm correct, in Danzig. Ibolika studied at the Franz Liszt Academy of Music in Budapest, and she received her diploma there. Her teacher there was Ernst von Dohnányi. Alex, you would probably have to correct my Hungarian with that. And at the age of 16, she won a piano competition and received a gold medal from Prince Esterházy of Hungary for it.
You might imagine I never met her. But she, thanks to her, we're here. Ibolika, oh goodness. She would play the piano at home, of course, and my dad has told us about stories of her playing the piano at home and teaching students at home. And this isn't precisely about Ibolika, but she inspired my dad to play piano. And he made a cardboard, drawn the keys, and pretended to play piano with his mother. So I'm not sure. The question was, who was Ibolika? She was my grandma.
Actually, the next photo on the slides, if we can go to the picture of Tim and Fred, we have a photo of your dad as a little boy. I thought that would go well with your thought if the tech person can get that photo.
One of the stories that I recall is that my dad, of course, enjoying his mother's playing, he would constantly be underneath the piano listening because he was so small at that time. And I'm sure that's how he learned to appreciate the music, and he constantly has been, ever since, looking for this music so he can remember those times.
To add to that, we grew up together very closely in each other's homes and in each other's lives. And yes, my uncle Fred, their father, always talked about his greatest desire was to find a piece of her music, or find recording of her music, I should say. And it's very sad that it was only a couple years ago that he got dementia, so he can't hear it today. So we're here to hear it for him.
He's still very pleasant. He recognizes us, and he laughs easily, which is quite the blessing. And Miriam, our stepmother, his current wife, she's our connection to Lauren. That's how Lauren and we got connected. So I just wanted to uplift us and recognize the blessing that my dad is he's just a wonderful person. He's still good.
One of the things I also remember is he loved to play the piano, and he literally could play any piece by hearing it first. And I think he got that from listening to his mother and then practicing on that cardboard piano because he could see where her fingers were going when the sound was playing, I'm sure. So one little thing that he told me, or I asked him to promise me, is that he had a player piano. And I asked him to record himself playing on that piano. He was not much for playing in front of people, but he would play on his own just to, you know, relax and calm himself and play like he used to play on that cardboard probably. But I asked him if he could leave me that piano so that I could have his music. When he passes.
Leontina, did you want to add something?
What an honor to sitting with you on this stage. It's very, very moving. Thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me tonight. I have a question in relation to your childhood, coming from this Jewish context where, in general, in Jewish families, music plays an important role. So when you are so excluded from a lot of things, the music is also the intangible room to escape to. What was the role of music in your childhood? Is it something that went along, and is it also something that you carry into the next generation as a sort of, you know, a Jewish tradition that you pass over? I'm very interested in that.
You saw my gesture. Music was huge. As you said, actually, and Greg said, he was not a performer. And I speak in past tense because he's not playing the piano a lot right now. But performance was not his thing. But he did, I remember sometimes as a teenager coming home and I could hear the piano. And I would have to sneak across the house, only part way down the stairs where the piano was, and hide behind the partition so that I could listen to him. Because if he knew I was home, he would stop. He was playing piano as a self-expression. That was what he enjoyed doing.
Was it also kind of healing, maybe?
Healing, yes, probably healing. You know, he did it when he was, probably some when he was happy, but maybe when he was stressed. You know, I was young enough that he wasn't confiding in me whatever it was that inspired him.
Talking about this point of healing, I wanted to ask if you could clarify what happened to Ibolika. You say that there was no way to hear her music, and maybe some people know your family's story, but I think that is a very important part of understanding your father's love of music and that connection to remembrance.
So they fled. My dad and his older brother, Tibor, were both born here or over across the bridge in Görlitz. And they started realizing it was not safe to stay. So they fled to the only country that would accept them without a visa, and that was China. So they fled Görlitz to Shanghai, China, and lived in a Jewish ghetto. To earn money, she taught piano. And Walter, as I understand it from my dad, was pretty artistic. So he drew a sign to advertise piano lessons. And because he was an artist, he signed the sign. He autographed it. And so actually in Shanghai, may know this, the drinking water was not properly separated from sewage. So Ebola got typhus and very sick and ended up going to the hospital. And I understand a week or so later, Walter went to the hospital. At this point, Tibor had already gone to England by kinder transport. So it was the baby sister, Ilona, which is Janice's mother, and my dad and his parents who had gone to China. So at this point where both parents are in the hospital, now my dad, who was 6 or 7 years old, was at home alone with a baby. In current times, I asked my dad, how did you know what to do with a baby? He shrugged his shoulders. He said, I just did what my mother did.
And how long were they alone?
He thinks it was about a week. Long enough the baby was going to cry. So, when the baby cried, he fed the baby. If that didn't work, he cradled the baby. And of course, what do you think his last choice for him? He changed the diapers if the cradling didn't work.
How old was he?
I think he was around 6 or 7 years old. There was a couple walking by and saw the sign for piano lessons. And she said to her husband in German, I wonder if this is the man I know from Germany. So she went to the door with her husband, knocked, and my dad, 6 or 7 years old, opens the door, and they find him with his baby sister. This woman took them in, realized the baby was sick, took the baby to the hospital. Over some time would take my father to visit his parents. And I don't think a lot of time passed when both my grandparents died, Ebola and Walter died. Now, my uncle is in England, my dad is in China, the baby is in the hospital in China. Nobody has money to pay for the baby in the hospital. So a doctor and his wife in the hospital said, we will pay for her care if you let us adopt her. There's more, lots of stories, and we've got an evening to go. But what ended up happening is the 3 children, the 3 siblings, were raised by 3 different couples as an only child. They were separated from their siblings.
And we
for
have
decades.
a photo of the family, if we could put that up there.
Janice wanted to say something, yes? Did you?
Können wir bitte das Foto von den Familien an der Leinwand machen, bitte? If it comes. There we go.
Here is their father, my Uncle Fred, known as, he was born, his birth name was Ferry. His dad, Walter, and here we have Ebola, and the older brother or older son, Tibor, who went on the kinder transport to England, and the baby is Ilona, my mother. Ebola's last words before she passed away were to this woman who brought her 2 children that were left. don't abandon my children, before she passed. So she was kind enough to adopt Fred and take this doctor on for his offer to take the baby.
Now, Renee, before we close up this discussion to move on to the next part of music, you're wearing something very special tonight. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us what that is?
This medallion was given to Ibolika, my grandmother, for her piano playing. She was about 16 or 17 years old in Hungary, by Prince Esterházy. And his name is on here. It's clearly very precious to us. And I thought tonight would be a good night to have it for us all to enjoy.
Thank you all so much. It's a bit of an interesting story how Sarah came to be in my life. I actually, in my former life as a singer, which I don't often talk about, I actually was at the Boston University Opera Institute about the same time as her husband, Clay. And it was by wonderful luck that they both moved to Berlin not too terribly long ago. And Sarah found out about the Jewish Remembrance Week, and she reached out so quickly and asked how to get involved with this wonderful week of remembrance, also honoring her own family's legacy as survivors of the Holocaust. So it is an absolute privilege to have Sarah here with us, not just tonight, but also for our Saturday night concert and as our artist in residence. So I would like to invite Sarah. I would like to invite Yuto to come back and make some beautiful music for us tonight. Thank you so much. I know, once again, like, amazing. Okay, so what are we going to talk about now?
Well, apart from that, you're wearing this beautiful dress, and it's so amazing what you have done in the last years in relation to not only the Jewish heritage of Görlitz, Gorzelec, but of course also sort of introducing living Jewish culture back to this place. So I'm very grateful for that. But I have a question for you in relation to music, because you are also a professional musical lady. And if you look at the program, what, out of your own professional perspective, would you sort of frame, contextualize what they were playing? Was it à la mode? Was it a specific, I don't know, youthful drive or popular music at the time? I mean, popular classical music, right?
Honestly, that's what, when I've talked to Sarah and Yuto in preparation for this concert, how I've referred to it is it's really like the greatest hits concert. And we'll especially hear that with the next set of songs coming up. Even Moonlight Sonata, Porgi Amore, these are really like the greatest hits. And I was so excited about that when I saw that, because I think classical music, like history sometimes, is a subject that people sometimes have a hard time getting their foot in the door. But if you have the right lead-in, it's such a fascinating world. And people, so many people say that classical music opera isn't relevant. I couldn't disagree more. I think that these songs, their themes, that's why I included translations for everyone. That's something my conservatory training would be, my professors would be proud of me for that, because I want you to understand the text. I think the texts of each of these songs that Sarah sang are works of art, especially the art songs. But for the time, I really think this would have been the best of the best, greatest hits, especially popular music during the 1920s for something like this. Things that someone could go to the piano and maybe not play as beautifully as Yuto or sing as beautifully as Sarah, but songbooks that people could have in their home, and when they get together and someone's had some champagne, say, okay, let's open up the Brahms. And people don't look at classical music like that anymore, and that's something that I wish we would, that it's not something that just has to be enjoyed in the first upper class, it's something that everyone can enjoy. And it's another reason why I really love to support artists like Sarah and Yuto when I can. Art's important, we need to support it. So is history. And that brings us to, actually, I'm the person you get to talk to about these people, because we're going to be talking about the singers of the program, which of course, being a singer, I was super interested in figuring out who these people were. And of course, no one here knew anything about it. So starting from scratch, number one. I knew who Leo Halpern was, but before we talk about Leo Halpern, I want to talk about Erna Kronheim, who was the singer of this program, and she would have been the soprano and
here we have them, right?
Yes, we do. So this is the photo that was sent to me of Erna and Max Kronheim. Erna was born on the 4th of July, 1891 in Posen, today Poznan. And the family came here around 1927. They had two children, Max and Erna. They had Leonard and they had Eva. And it's another story of a family really that got broken apart. So when I found this program, I contacted my wonderful Jewish descendant, Jody Wallach, who is here in with the gorgeous feathers sticking out of her lovely hair, her updo. And Jody is kind of my partner in crime and genealogy, and if I can't crack something, I call this girl. And I couldn't crack Erna. And so Jody helped me find their family. And we found them in Israel and South Africa, because this is another family that's been torn apart. And this is an example of a family that wanted nothing to do with Görlitz. They sent me these two photos. I found something in the newspaper. I think they would like to get a copy of this concert tonight. What they told me about Erna is that she was not a professional musician, but she loved singing and she loved classical music, and she would have probably been very proud to support events like this. But I thought this was also an interesting viewpoint from the work that I do, that not every family that I work with is interested in having a connection with Görlitzers today. And this is an example of that.
And we also but deeply have to acknowledge that and respect
100%.
that. Absolutely.
And so that's about the extent of what I've learned about Erna and Max. And the next picture is a picture I found when I was in the archives in Görlitz looking at old newspapers. I actually found his law office in one of the old newspapers, and I sent it to the family, and they're very grateful for those little things. Ava's family all lives in Israel today. I got to speak with her grandchildren specifically because, of course, she was born in 1891. She passed away in the 80s. But I think that they are very grateful that we're honoring her memory tonight, especially her love of music, because she is an example of someone who was not a professional musician. Ibolika was, but Erna just liked to sing for what I imagine because it made her heart happy. And I think everyone should sing for that reason. But the really interesting rabbit hole that I went down was with Leo Halpern.
Tell me about him.
Leo Halpern, can we get his picture up there? This is another one that Jody helped me with. I have to give her credit because I don't do this work alone. I do have friends that help me. And it's even cooler because she's the granddaughter of a Görlitz Holocaust survivor a Görlitzer Holocaust survivor. This man, this is the only photo we have of this man from Görlitz. But he was so important in the community, and it blows my mind that no one here has ever written about him. There has been nothing academically published about this man. Literally, there's a black hole when it comes to him, but he was so important. Basically, Leo Halpern came to Görlitz in the 1920s to be the new cantor. I found out...
Because not all are aware, what is a cantor?
So a cantor is one of the spiritual leaders in a Jewish community that sings the prayers. And in his case, he would also train young boys during their bar mitzvahs to read the Torah. He was the man that prepared so many of the fathers of people sitting in this room, Howard Wallach, Kurt Feldman. He would have been the person bar mitzvahing your parents. And
so also very much a mentor, helping these young boys into entering adult life.
100%. And he supported this youth program. I'm pretty sure that he was the organizer of the program that we're making tonight. I think he picked the music. But Leo Halpern, for being this, when I found these 10 boxes, I kept seeing his name pop up in documents. And so I said, this man has to be something really important. And then I started putting more pieces of the puzzle together. So Görlitz had a rabbi, Max Cotton, who was the rabbi for several years. We see that this was his invitation. It's on one of the posters up ahead, up there in the front. And when Rabbi Max Cotton left, a new rabbi came, and this was 1933, so a big time of change. And his name was Dr. Krakauer. Dr. Krakauer started being harassed by the Gestapo in Görlitz almost from day one. April 1933, we have letters that we found in Jerusalem where he's writing to the big brother in Breslau, the Jewish community of Breslau, saying, listen, they are harassing me over pieces of the Torah, like taking sections of the Torah and drilling him over it because it's not Christian theology. And this started happening so early in Görlitz. So Dr. Krakauer did not take any chances. 1934, he was out of here on his way to British Mandate Palestine. And Görlitz was left without a rabbi from 1934 on. And it was this man,
he took over the role,
that held this community together. Now, Leo Halpern, with many of the families that I interview, there's a lot of mystery about what happened on Reichspogromnacht here in Görlitz, or for the Americans, Kristallnacht. And I've heard so many people tell me, we heard one of the families today saying, my grandfather protected the Torah rolls, and I've heard this from several families, and it wasn't adding up in my brain. It's like, okay, so where's the truth in this? Was this person there? Was this person there? And it was the testimony of Dr. Ralph Nurenberger's father, where I learned that actually all of the Jewish men in the community decided to hide in the basement of the Görlitz synagogue on November the 9th, 1938. When the SS started banging at the door, some of them decided this is not a good idea, they're going to catch all of us here, and some of them went out the back exit into the Stadtpark. Dr. Nurenberger was one of these men who hid in a bush the whole night, what I can imagine was probably one of the scariest nights of his life. The mob set the Torah Ark on fire, and the remaining men who were downstairs rushed upstairs to try to save the Torah. It wasn't just one person, it was 26 men. And when I had my appendix surgery, I was very bored in the hospital.
That's a hell of a minion, 26 men.
26 men. And when I had my appendix surgery, I was very bored when they wouldn't let me go home. And so I started looking through the archives of Sachsenhausen, because you can't look up in the Sachsenhausen archives on Usham, Görlitz. You have to know names. So I put every name of the men that I knew were members of this community. And I got 26 names that were arrested on the same day in Görlitz, in Sachsenhausen, and this is the first time that we know these names. And Leo Halpern was one of these people. Gerhard Frankl, who got his Stolperstein today, was one of these people. But finally that put the pieces together that it wasn't just one isolated person. This was the community. They were hiding there. They were afraid. And Leo Halpern was one of these men. After Sachsenhausen, after he was released, he and his wife Edith were able to secure through a friend in New York, which in 1939 was almost impossible to get a visa to go to America. It was so hard to get out. They were able to secure one of these golden tickets. And they went eventually to Ohio.
Most probably because he was such a well-respected person.
He was extremely well-respected. And the man that I'm about to show you on this video, you can upload the video. I don't want to show it yet, so don't play it yet, please. In the process of searching for information, Jody directed me to a newspaper archive, and she said, "Is this your guy, Leo Halpern from Görlitz?" And there were hundreds of mentions from Leo Halpern in Columbus, Ohio. Ohio, like middle of nowhere, America.
Well, you can say that. I'm not allowed.
No, but seriously, it's flyover country. And so I started reading these old newspaper articles, and I kept reading, Cantor Leo Halpern officiates this wedding. This man went on. This is a person who so easily could have lost his drive for life. He moved to America, and he was a cantor for the Tenerife Israel Synagogue, which is a huge synagogue still today, for 20 more years, where he continued to mentor young people, where he continued to sing the prayers. And that just was astounding for me to learn. And even better, I contacted the synagogue and said, "Hi, I'm Lauren Leiderman, a young woman living in Görlitz, my normal shtick, and I'm looking for anyone that might know something about Cantor Leo Halpern." And they said, "I need to connect you with Jack Chomsky. He just moved to Tel Aviv, he retired, but he was one of Leo's apprentices, and Leo taught him how to be a cantor." So the wonderful people at the synagogue put me in contact with Jack Chomsky, who was so excited to make the video you're going to see tonight. So let's show that video and hear what Jack has to say, because Jack went from Tel Aviv, he went to go see friends in New York, and because of Jewish Remembrance Week, he went special to Columbus to make this video for us to see here tonight. So Jack, I know you're going to be watching this from Tel Aviv eventually. Thank you so much for helping us keep the memory of Leo Halpern alive. Let's play that video.
Hi, my name is Jack Chomsky. I'm the cantor emeritus of Congregation Tifereth Israel. I served the congregation from 1982 to 2020, and then I retired to Tel Aviv, where I now live with my wife, and our daughter, son-in-law, and grandson are there as well. This is the congregation that Leo Halpern served. I'm sorry that I didn't get to know Leo well, but I did. I think I may have only met him one time that I visited him at Heritage House, and he served the congregation from 1940 to 1953, but lived here for many, many years after that. There aren't many people, I haven't really found anyone yet who remembers him in the time of his service here, but I'm standing here in the sanctuary where he served. Behind me are the beautiful stained glass windows that were in the congregation at that time. And then I'm going to add a video where I'm taking you around and showing you some things. Turning the camera around in the opposite direction, you see these windows that represented the 12 tribes of Israel. We have windows on the other side of the sanctuary that we'll visit in a little bit, with symbols up at the top of the burning bush and a dove of peace and a reminder of Noah and the hands of the Kohanim. And then, as I said, these other lower windows are evocative of the 12 tribes. Now I'm going to continue on the other side of the sanctuary. Here are the other windows which face the west. So those other windows I was showing you faced east. And at the top here you'll see Noah's Ark, a rainbow, the promise of covenant, the Ten Commandments, and here we have a reminder of the temple and the sacrificial altar. When Leo served here, the bima was at the northern end of the congregation, and the building ended kind of at the wall that I'm showing you. That wall can be removed when we have more people. And in the 1960s, I think it was, they expanded to accommodate a growing congregation, and then they placed this bima here. But this would have been done after Leo had stopped serving the congregation, but it is the main picture that people have of Tiferet Israel. I suspect that the chandelier that is part of our life was indeed part of the life of the congregation at that time. We see the cornerstone of the congregation, which that says 1901 to 1926, but I think is before. The building was built in the late 20s, I think either just at the onset of the Depression or just before it. But originally, so this is definitely the place where Leo served as Chazan for many years. These buildings were added later, and I have to assume that at some point he might have enjoyed these buildings, although they were added after his tenure in the congregation. The building on the right is an educational building of the congregation. And this in the center is a new entrance that was beautified sometime during my tenure, if I recall. So that was after 1982. Continuing now with a look at the outside facade of the western edge of the building. You can see those windows that we looked at before. Congregation Tiferet Israel, Columbus, Ohio. Hopefully a home for many great moments in the life of Leo and Edith Halpern.
What is so beautiful about this is that Jewish history is very much transnational, transcontinental history, and of course that also is also the case in Görlitz. Very much so, because it was also a porthole between Central and further Eastern Europe and other parts of Europe, and then of course after 1933 where people went into exile around the world. And of course, because of the history of Görlitz post 45, that it's sort of forgotten. And it's so beautiful that there is this direct link to Ohio, right? Columbus, Ohio. And we all go there next week, right?
Next year in Columbus. You can prepare that for us, Jack. That, and also just that his spirit didn't damper, because these were just some of the things that Jack and the synagogue sent me. They also sent me lots of letters of testimonies of students who he had prepared for bar mitzvahs. And you could just really read in these letters the impact that he had on the youth that he served. And we could make assumptions that that was very similar to the people's families who are in this room when he was doing that here in Görlitz. I also have tremendous respect that Cantor Halper didn't leave Görlitz sooner than he did, and I really do feel, after what I've learned about him, that he really loved that community, and that's why he didn't leave. He wanted to keep your families together. He wanted to give them a safe space in a world that was changing so quickly. And the fact that one of the things that was sent to me just the other day was they found his obituary. And I want to read a part of it.
Oh, yeah, please.
It says, "We gather here today to pay tribute to a man of talent, a man of intellect, a man whose marriage was a model of intense devotion, a unique and special man in our community. Cantor Leo Halpern was a brilliant man, a real well-read intellectual, a master of literature. In recent years, many of us have been privileged to read pieces that he wrote for the Heritage House. He was extremely well educated. He was appreciative of literature, well in his command of words in multiple languages, philosophical in his approach to life, and and his knowledge in Jewish sources. He had a beautiful voice and a tremendous knowledge of music, as well as a mastery of the music of the synagogue. Leo and Edith Halpern came to America from Germany, where they were married 66 years ago. He had studied at the conservatory in Dresden, then served a small congregation in Dresden, Berlin, and later headed the community in Görlitz. Germany was his home. They loved the German language, and they knew its literature and all of their philosophers. But when the Nazis came to power, Germany became a dangerous place for Leo and Edith. Leo was arrested by the Nazis. Courageously, Edith went to the authorities and was able to gain his release, at least temporarily. They knew it was time for them and their son Werner to leave the Germany that they had so loved. They came to New York, found a brief home with a congregation in Reading, Pennsylvania, then moved on to Columbus in 1940. He served as cantor here at Tifereth, Israel, for nearly 20 years and continued to serve and help and teach for some years after that. His voice was beautiful. He was an excellent Ba'al Koreh, Torah reader, and a talented teacher. A whole generation learned their bar mitzvah studies from him, both in the United States and in Germany, and they learned it well. He was a demanding teacher, and what his students learned they used with confidence and retained for years and years to come. I spoke with Rabbi Zeller yesterday, who offered his condolences as well as some special thoughts. In addition to talent and intellect, the words he often repeated were the words loyal, dependable, and steady. Cantor Halpern was a true gift to this world. If he made a commitment, he kept it. He was true to his word. He worked hard, teaching and organizing a choir, reading the Torah, and much, much more. His students learned well and grew to love him very much. Leo and Edith shared everything for 66 years, and it wasn't long enough. They were totally devoted to each other. They shared a love of literature. They shared memories and experiences. They shared a strength of will, and they strengthened each other in adversity and in tragedy. Their home was a special sanctuary. Even at Heritage House, they were always together, and they were extremely unique and special in their devotion to one another. Life was not easy, but Leo and Edith faced it together, gave each other the strength to go forward, and provided the love, which was the most important and precious thing in each of their lives. Every day together was special, and he was grateful for everything he had, even in the worst of circumstances. In recent years, Cantor Halpern not only wrote articles of interest and stories for the Heritage House, but he also wrote notes and cards at special times to express some of his feelings. He was grateful for the strength he had, for the years he had, and he was proud of what he could share and who he had touched, how he had touched people very deeply with his use of language. We were all very fortunate to have known him and to have learned from him and to be able to see the love and devotion that made Leo and Edith Halpern two truly unique people. Tito what it was like to recreate a historical concert, because when I contacted you with this, did y'all think I was crazy or?
I loved the idea. From the start, I thought it sounded like the coolest idea. It's very interesting to think about singing things that other singers chose, and fortunately it was a tenor and a soprano, so it worked out very well. But yeah, it was really fascinating to step into those voices. You can certainly hear the pieces that tenors love to sing. So there were pieces that I was like, oh yes, a tenor definitely chose this. This is definitely like just a tenor in his element. But yeah, it was really cool to look at an already prepared program.
It is difficult to say somehow, but so at first, but so it is big honor. It was big honor that I was a part of this big, so huge, important, so beautiful project, and yeah, somehow I don't know, but so I'm really happy now, and yeah.
I'm still so emotionally overwhelmed, and I want to marry all three of you. But I have a question actually, because you have been a musician in residence or an artist in residence the whole week here, and still, and especially knowing this story and Leo's. And of course everybody that we talked about this evening, the importance of music in Jewish culture and the anchor it also provided for people not only in the 20s but especially also in the 30s. How was it for you, or how is it for you as a musician to be here?
Yeah, that's a very deep question.
Sorry.
No, and I am prepared to talk about it. This is the first of the two concerts that I'll be doing this week, and I had thought a lot about how it would feel to be here and to be with other survivors and to perform. In opera, we perform a lot of very emotionally heavy and sometimes traumatizing things, but it's always someone else's story. And there's kind of a screen that you can put down. You have your emotions in rehearsal, you get it out of your system, and then you go and you do your job, and you sort of cut yourself off emotionally so that you can sing, so that you can actually produce the sounds. You can't sing and cry at the same time. And I knew that for this project I wouldn't be able to do this because it's my story, it's me, it's my family. So I tried to prepare for it emotionally. Fortunately, these songs are nice and light and happy. But I think the moment that I walked in here today, it hit me in a way that I tried to prepare for, but maybe couldn't until I got here. And listening to all of you speak before just hit me in a way that I had hoped I would be prepared for, but sort of knew that I wouldn't be. Yeah, I think it's a really, really unique experience to be in. It's one that I'm really honored to be in. It's something that I hope to continue doing. In terms of how music relates to my life as a Jewish woman and as a survivor descendant, I've always felt my connection to Judaism through music. So, we always belonged to Reformed congregations, but I would always, I don't like the guitar, like the, like I was always like, all right, well, we gotta do the real music, like, come on, like where's the Lewandowski, where's, and that was always my connection. I had a choir when I was growing up where we got to do this really cool Jewish liturgy, like liturgical music for the high holidays, and that for me was always the way I connected most to my Judaism. And so it's always been music. It's always been, whether it's Jewish music or secular music. My husband and I moved to Berlin about 1.5 years ago, and I feel like every day that I am making music in Germany, as a Jewish woman, as a descendant of survivors, it feels like this very significant thing that I am living in Germany, making my dreams come true musically, and sharing this gift that wouldn't have existed if not for a miracle. So it feels that every time I perform, it's a miracle that I get to do this. Yeah. Well, before I get too emotional, we do have one more surprise if you want it. Yeah? I think that's enough. So I couldn't have my friends come all this way and not ask to at least relive some old memories. So since this is the greatest hits concert, we decided to add a greatest hit that we think that could have easily been on this list had Leo been a mezzo and not a tenor.